After many battles, the human army and the Demon King's army grew weary. They decided to let their two leaders fight each other. On one side was the human hero Graham, who had been granted power by the goddess Medea and wielded a holy sword with demon-slaying power. On the other side was the immortal Demon King Veltal with his unimaginable strength. This was already Veltal's 1000th year as Demon King, making this battle nothing more than a stroll for him. After toying with each other for a while, the hero seemed to be at a disadvantage, and Veltal decided to end the fight. However, the result was the opposite with his overpowered holy sword. Graham successfully destroyed the Demon King, bringing victory to humanity. Both acknowledged each other as formidable opponents. Before disappearing, Veltal warned Graham to train his descendants well, because he would be reborn once more. Unexpectedly, it took 500 years for him to be reborn. More accurately, he was resurrected through a ritual, a lengthy one. But Veltal didn't blame Machina for that. Being alive again was good enough. There was nothing to complain about. The surroundings had changed significantly, but this was still where magic had been practiced from that time until now. Veltal wanted to rule the world once more, but times had changed. Ans and Earth had reintegrated, and now humans used both technology and magic in their daily lives. Humans knowing magic was something Veltal had never imagined. The world that now appeared before his eyes overwhelmed him. Feeling he wouldn't get enough attention from ordinary people, Veltal decided to show off his power to intimidate them. However, even children who saw this mocked him. He realized his power had weakened considerably. Now he even had to hide in crowds to avoid being caught by the police. Machina recounted the entire story. After Veltal's defeat, both sides signed a peace treaty. The immortal army dispersed, each going their separate ways. Although they had been living peacefully with humans, humans suddenly went crazy, claiming immortals were harmful entities affecting mankind. The movement to eradicate immortals broke out once again, and by now, few remained. However, the 6 demon marquises were still intact, having lost only one person who had sacrificed himself in the war. These were the 6 generals who served directly under Veltal, and Machina was one of them. When he asked her about Marcus, the user of blood demon arts, Machina changed the subject. There was definitely something suspicious going on. While waiting for her to sneak away to buy drinks, Veltal took the opportunity to observe his surroundings. He noticed magical elements gathering around this girl, and with a snap of his fingers, advertisements on buildings suddenly became distorted. This act of vandalism seemed to have no clear purpose. Intrigued, Veltal asked what was happening. The girl was surprised that he could easily detect the magical elements. For a demon king, this was nothing difficult, but he didn't understand her operating mechanism and methods. When it came to her profession, she couldn't stop talking, making him sleepy. Veltal, unable to understand, interrupted her. He asked if she knew someone named Marcus. It turned out he was now the chairman of the largest company in this city. Veltal went straight there to ask why. After the Demon King's resurrection, Marcus hadn't come to pay his respects. But Marcus remained indifferent, congratulating him while staying seated high above. It was obvious he had betrayed Veltal. Still, Veltal forgave him and offered a chance to start over. Feeling insulted by his subordinate, he was about to teach him a lesson when the secretary on the other side drew her sword. Marcus said he wanted to speak privately with Veltal for a moment. He mocked Veltal for being weak as a snail, yet wanting to rule the world. Utterly ridiculous. Veltal attempted to use his powers to teach him a lesson but was neutralized. Had he really become this weak? Although he didn't need to chant incantations, he still couldn't perform magic. A commercial break from Marcus. He was the creator of the Familia chip implanted at the nape of the neck. It bypassed the barriers needed to perform magic and helped humans use it easily, just like using a computer. Anyone could use it except for one person. He had anticipated Veltal's rebirth and designed it so that Veltal couldn't use Familia. Thanks to this, he could now look down on him and disregard him completely. Originally, he had always hated Veltal, but accepted being his subordinate because he was weaker. Now was his opportunity to defeat Veltal and become the modern-day Demon King. Helpless, Veltal endured all attacks. It had taken him over 10 minutes to go up, but only seconds to come down. Now Marcus could confidently declare himself the new Demon King. Veltal dragged himself away with a jumble of confusing thoughts in his head. Even his wounds healed very slowly. He could even be defeated by ordinary people who couldn't use magic. When Machina found him, he was already lying in a pile of garbage. Was the era of the Demon King over? The one whom Graham had defeated was now weaker than an ordinary person. Machina took him to her apartment. Veltol thought it would be a castle, but it turned out to be a room smaller than a warehouse. It seemed she hadn't been living smoothly in this world either. Veltol embraced her and promised to regain their glory, not letting them live in such poor conditions. Previously, Machina had been a victim of an immortal extermination. She was pushed into a volcano and thought her life was over. But a star saved her, none other than Veltol, and she vowed to be loyal to him for life. Machina woke up early to make breakfast for Veltol. To her, he was still her respected master and the benefactor who had saved her life. Though the breakfast was rather plain due to her low salary, her cooking skills pleased him greatly. It turned out that immortals and demons also needed to eat cooked food. When Veltol praised her cooking, she was overjoyed. Perhaps she had secretly fallen in love with her master. Veltol asked again about the others in the 6 demon marquees. Machina didn't know much. She had also just lost connection with 2 more. Although the hunt for immortals had ended, immortals still mysteriously disappeared frequently. Feeling uneasy, Veltol decided to go outside to search, but he couldn't go out wearing these absurd clothes. Couldn't a demon king conjure decent attire for himself? Machina decided to take him shopping. Technology had become so advanced that they didn't need to visit stores physically. They could stand and have their bodies scanned for perfectly fitting clothes, with automatic payments so no one would know they were poor. Perfect for Machina. Veltol asserted that even in beggar's clothes, he would still look handsome. With his physique, people might prefer him wearing nothing at all. But Machina would never let that happen. She was the only one who had seen him for the past 500 years. So Veltol chose sportswear very similar to what young people wore after reincarnation. Although he couldn't use familia, he was curious about them, so he touched Machina's to see what it was like. Just by touching it, Veltol could analyze it immediately. Basically, it was like a phone or computer, but without needing to hold it in hand, and it could also use magic, making it quite convenient. Look at how excited she was. Standing in front of the small, old house, Veltol said he would get a job to have a better life. Although Machina objected, he didn't want to remain in this impoverished state forever. How could he rule the world again like this? She could only obey and swore to always be loyal to Veltol, no matter what he became. Despite his bold words, he didn't know how to find a job. What kind of work would be available for him here? He thought the simple sportswear would look casual, but once he put it on, he looked like a thug. Veltol wondered if he'd have to compete with beggars for food. He stood up and shouted that he needed a job, but no one paid attention. He was directed to the Commerce Guild, hoping to find suitable work there. But his CV made people unsure what job to give him. Experience commanding armies, using magic to destroy opponents, and experience as a king, all useless in this era. Times had truly changed. Veltol returned home to be consoled by Machina. He had lost all his former confidence. She said it was because humans were blind and couldn't perceive the Demon King's greatness. That was somewhat comforting, but he still didn't want to be useless. He wanted to find a job that required neither qualifications nor familia. Machina had to ask a friend who also worked an odd job. Perhaps that person could help Veltol into some kind of vice. Surprisingly, it was Takahashi, the girl who had hacked advertisements the other day. Seeing she used a different familia than Machina, he was curious again. With his analytical ability as a sage, he discovered their structure just by touching them. Back to the main issue of finding a job. Veltol's requirements were simple: just a job that didn't require familia, but could increase his fame. His power depended on human emotions. The more people knew about him, the faster he would regain his original power. While wondering if such a job existed, an advertisement appeared, and they immediately decided on becoming an idol. Takahashi said this job was perfect for Veltol. He had a beautiful appearance, a perfect CEO-like physique, and a face as pretty as a girl's, which would surely attract many fans. That would also meet his need for fame. Veltol was born to do this job, but if he wanted to do it long-term, he needed to know how to attract viewers. With her old-fashioned perspective, Machina didn't want to share Veltol with anyone else, but he knew this was his opportunity. He went home to learn more about this job. Generally, it was very favorable for his goal of becoming famous. Being able to manipulate the entire city's residents would help him quickly regain his former power. Takahashi had ordered some necessary equipment for the job, of course, with interest on the loan. First, he would practice playing these games, the easiest way to start live streaming. As soon as he held the controller, Veltol knew how to play. But being good or bad was another matter. His first attempt ended with him crashing into a wall and losing. It would probably take some time to practice. Takahashi said that playing poorly was also a way to attract viewers. It wasn't clear if she was complimenting or criticizing him. She said Veltal needed to work very hard to survive in this harsh idle world. Once he started live streaming, he had to stream continuously, as long as possible. Even if no one was watching, he had to keep talking without stopping. As for Machina, the only thing she needed to do was not to interfere with Veltal, while Takahashi would ask her acquaintances to promote him. And so, Veltal gradually became an influencer. Whether the influence was negative or positive, it all helped increase his power significantly. Even if he was cursed and insulted, he had to endure it. Before long, Veltal had 1 million followers. Finally, after months of hard work, Veltal was able to complete the first game. He said goodbye to his fans to go outside for a change of scenery, saying he wanted to walk alone. Veltal walked through a street full of beggars. The more splendid the city, the more clearly the wealth gap was displayed. Suddenly, he encountered a familiar person. How could an ordinary person like Graham still be alive after 500 years? He had always hated Veltal. After just one hunting trip, Graham had lost all his family members. He had destroyed the Demon King, but why was he in this state now? Mortal enemies were now sitting together eating pho, and it was with Veltal, no less. He asked if Graham had become immortal, but Graham had only been granted longevity as a reward after defeating the Demon King. However, existing for 500 years hadn't been pleasant. Through many battles, it was meaningful at first, but when humans started killing each other, Graham was drawn into meaningless wars. Moreover, he was too powerful, making humans fear him, banishing him from the country, and forcing him to wander to this place. The world no longer needed heroes like Graham. He asked why Veltal wanted to rule the world, which prompted Veltal to bring up his absurd ideals. He became a star bringing peace to the world. Graham couldn't stand this nonsense and left. The unexpected reunion ended on an unpleasant note. As Veltal was returning, he saw a familiar face. It seemed Takahashi was having a dispute with a big guy. He didn't know what it was about, but she was hurling insults that made him furious. As the man was about to teach her a lesson, Veltal stepped in. This was the moment to test the power of his 1 million followers. Indeed, he easily defeated this guy. After all, he was just an ordinary person. It seemed he was someone Takahashi had hired for some operation. But today he suddenly turned on her, demanding more money, which caused the incident. Taking advantage of the situation, she hired Veltal to go stealing. He didn't care whether it was good or bad. Being a Demon King meant nothing was too daring for him, so he agreed. Takahashi said she would hack into the system to check the situation inside first, but Veltal couldn't wait. He charged straight in. Kicking the door open, he knew he was very powerful. Actually, Veltal had already identified what needed to be taken without using Familia. He replicated its functions with his own magic. This was the pinnacle of knowledge. Veltal asked if they knew who he was, but it seemed none of them were among his million fans. Veltal continued testing his strength, quickly kicking away the pathetic bullets and swiftly taking down each opponent one by one. His speed was extremely fast, but why didn't he use magic to make it quicker? Perhaps he feared accidentally damaging Takahashi's merchandise. Just when they thought it was over, things weren't that easy. As soon as he touched the item, a trap was activated. Someone in an invisibility cloak attacked Veltal. It turned out to be a type of combat machine. Takahashi immediately recognized it as a 4th-generation Magino. More importantly, it was a military weapon, not something these small timers could possess. She advised Veltal to run because it was very powerful. But he, of course, knew his own strength. This was a worthy opponent to fight. It had been a long time since he could use his full power. These useless guns had no effect. He could even face a rain of bullets without a scratch. But the Magino wasn't easy either with his current strength. Veltal couldn't penetrate its armor. He decided to fight more seriously. He changed his armor and weapon, though this wasn't the strongest sword Veltal owned. The robot also drew its sword for close combat. Though mindless, it had the spirit of a swordsman. Veltal highly appreciated this, but playtime was over. Both powered up their weapons for decisive strikes, but the Magino was surprisingly fast and took off Veltal's right arm. The bonus gift was a head rolling far away. The robot thought it had won. But immortal wasn't just a name. Even with his head separated from his body, Veltal remained as conscious as if nothing had happened. He picked up and reattached his head and arm, becoming whole again. Veltal gave the robot a chance to see his strongest sword. Although he couldn't use his full power now, dying under it was still an honor. Even a robot could feel fear. Veltal charged with clean, swift cuts in just a few strokes. The combat machine became scrap metal. He wanted to ask it a few questions, but it had already stopped functioning. Only then did Takahashi dare to show her face. She was shocked by the scene, shocked by the robot, but truly haunted by Veltal's decapitation. Examining the Marino 4, she discovered they had taken on a very serious job. Things wouldn't end here, so they needed to see what was inside the small box first. She had been hired to steal it, but was also curious about its contents. Unexpectedly, it contained a list of names of immortals. Veltal's subjects were all there, which made him very suspicious about this situation. The two decided to go directly to the client's place to inquire. As king of the immortals, Veltal had every right to be involved. However, both sensed something wasn't right. Standing outside, they rang the doorbell repeatedly with no answer. More accurately, the door had been left open beforehand. For someone with a cautious character who worked in the shadows, Takahashi said this client couldn't be this careless. Upon entering, an unpleasant smell hit them directly, and they found the client sitting at his desk. However, he had been murdered and was now just a pitiful corpse. Veltal recognized him as the beggar they had met in episode 1. He usually disguised himself as a homeless person to gather information. After observing the surroundings for a while, Veltal concluded he had been killed by a cold-blooded assassin not long ago. The blood hadn't congealed, and his familia had been destroyed, clearly a case of silencing someone. But for someone so careful, Takahashi believed he must have hidden documents elsewhere. After searching for a while, they found a personal computer. Although it didn't require a password, it was full of corrupted files, but Veltal recognized this as a security matrix. A video appeared titled The Immortal Furnace Project. The client had apparently been researching this topic for a long time. Since it wasn't publicly disclosed, he could only work on it secretly. The explanation was lengthy, so here's a concise summary. The prosperity of this city was due to the energy from a reactor. It provided electricity and water for people's daily lives. A normal reactor needed 10 magical circuits to maintain, but the one in this city had only 2, requiring an alternative solution to sustain it. That was the Immortal Furnace Project. True to its name, this furnace would burn immortal souls and convert them into magical energy. One immortal could provide and maintain energy for a long time. It would take tens of thousands of ordinary people to do the same, and the stronger the immortal, the longer the duration. The client had also discovered that the first subject of this research was one of the 6 demon marquises. Shocking news for Veltal. See what humans had done to his subjects. It was also time to find a new source of raw materials, meaning more immortals would have to sacrifice their lives. Veltal said that as king of the immortals, he would handle this matter himself and advised against making the video public since people would have opposing opinions anyway. First, he wanted to go home to discuss with Machina, but suddenly he lost connection with her. Something was wrong. Going back to when Veltal had just left home, Machina was thinking about what to cook for dinner. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. As soon as she opened the door and saw Marcus, she launched an attack that sent him flying. It wasn't clear how much she hated him, but certainly, no place would shelter or welcome a traitor. The two began exchanging various techniques. They seemed evenly matched, but in reality, Marcus was just toying with her. He wouldn't have come if he knew he couldn't win. He launched an attack, and Machina defended successfully. However, the blood blades exploded, destroying the cozy house. In the smoke, the secretary appeared and struck, but Machina managed to dodge. She knew there would be accomplices, but the secretary was an ordinary person, so Machina planned to deal with her first. Unexpectedly, she was neutralized by Marcus. In the moment of surprise, she received a sword through her body. She couldn't understand how Marcus could neutralize her familia. But he was the creator of these devices naturally. His familia was the server that could control others. He could have done this from the beginning but wanted to play with her a bit. He said ruling the world by force was outdated. Now he would become a demon king ruling through technology and machinery. When Veltal and Takahashi returned, it was too late. Machina had already been taken to the immortal furnace to be prepared as material. It was at this moment, when Veltal was about to lose Machina, that he realized how much he cared for her. Takahashi accessed cameras and drones around to see what had happened. As expected, Veltal knew Marcus was the culprit, and his motive was the immortal furnace. He had to save her at all costs, but his current strength wasn't enough, and he didn't know where his other marquises were. There really seemed to be no way to deal with this Marcus. Veltal thought of someone he never considered before: his old enemy, the hero Graham. he humbled himself to ask for help. But Graham couldn't accept it. He was still bitter about the Demon King's army killing his family. Moreover, the reactor was the heart of the city. Graham couldn't help Veltal save one immortal in exchange for darkness engulfing the entire city. He thought Veltal was still selfish, only caring about his personal matters. But Veltal disagreed. He would save both Machina and the city. This was the true Demon King that Graham knew. Eventually, Graham accepted Veltal's invitation, a collaboration no one had ever imagined. Soon, both arrived at the reactor. Takahashi had found an abandoned passage that didn't require entering through the main door. The place seemed quite desolate with no guards, meaning they didn't know what lay ahead in the darkness. In other words, Veltal was afraid of getting lost. But it was fine with Graham there. He had conquered all those dungeons. The hero now not only knew how to use magic, but also created new types. A quick scan produced a detailed map. Veltal felt dissatisfied. He had spent time designing challenges and treasures in dungeons for adventurers. Yet this guy preferred using a private passage. Graham also complained that many people had died because of Veltal's dungeons. In the end, it was Takahashi who scolded both of them with such difficulty getting along. She wondered if this would work out. Graham led both along the shortest path, but couldn't guarantee smooth sailing ahead. He noticed Veltal was stronger than before, which sounded ironic since he was currently very weak. But people become stronger when they have something important to protect before. Veltal had never had such a thing. The door opened, and the secretary had been waiting here since the afternoon. Both sides knew they would face each other. Graham said he would handle her so Veltal could go straight to the immortal furnace. Meanwhile, Machina was being restrained by a magical handcuff. As soon as she regained consciousness, she received countless shocks. Actually, Marcus was just explaining his plan to her, intending to provoke her. After hearing it, Machina found it unbearable. She burst forth with power, but couldn't do anything to him instead. It made him even more smug about his achievements. He had not only betrayed the Demon King, but also used his own teammates as fuel. Immortals who fell into this furnace would lose their souls completely, providing enough life source for the city's residents for a long time. Conveniently, the fuel had just run out and needed urgent replacement. If Machina wanted Veltal to continue live streaming for a living, she needed to sacrifice her life. Back to Veltal and Graham, the secretary began to mock these ancient generation people as outdated ghosts. Veltal reminded her that she was using a sword as powerful as one of his marqueas, but Graham was confident because he had defeated him before. However, he was surprised when she attacked truly as fast as lightning. It was only due to his years of combat experience that he could react in time. Veltal took the opportunity to run to Machina. It seemed that even as a ghost, the secretary would take quite some time to resolve this matter. She activated some magic after a blinding flash, and Graham was blown away, breaking through the wall. She had just activated an armor around her body, and her weapon was also enhanced, stronger than before. This was the 4th generation Magino in the testing phase compared to the previous model. It was both stronger and faster, yet more energy efficient. Graham clearly felt the difference from earlier. Now he could only defend to find an opportunity to counterattack. After clashing for a while, he realized this armor was also very hard to attack. It was truly comprehensive in both offense and defense with no weaknesses. Fortunately, they weren't fighting in the city, or it would have caused a major disaster. He quickly noticed something else about the attack pattern. The sword would unleash its strongest killing techniques when just drawn from its sheath, a very good Japanese sword technique. The secretary was quite surprised by his perceptiveness. It seemed that whether a hero or a demon king, they were all intelligent, not just relying on brute force. But she believed that even if exposed, the outcome wouldn't change. However, after several stormy attacks, Graham still wasn't shaken. She began to shift from confidence to irritation, not understanding or not wanting to understand why she couldn't defeat Graham. She even tried using hacks to destroy his sword, but to no avail. Every time she charged, she was knocked back. Graham began to counterattack, using some magic he had learned, realizing physical attacks were ineffective. However, the armor also seemed highly resistant to magic, but at least he had found a way to make her stand still. After a series of Graham's techniques, the secretary had to start using oxygen. He complimented the geniuses who made this armor, but that was its limit. The secretary was unwilling to accept defeat to an outdated person with a dull sword. But that assessment was wrong. Graham said he would show her the true power of the sword blessed by the goddess. The holy sword Excalibur began to glow golden and shine brightly. Both unleashed their strongest techniques simultaneously. The secretary charged quickly, but as soon as she arrived, she was overwhelmed by the enormous size of Graham's sword. He delivered a clean cut straight down on his opponent. This would either kill or cripple her. However, after 500 years, Graham still couldn't control this power. Each time, he could only use it once. Fortunately, he won every time he used it. The armor managed to withstand it and save the secretary's life, but she still seemed unconvinced. She even said that he should hurry to Veltol because her chairman was very powerful, and the two of them couldn't handle him. Graham thought this was the funniest joke in 500 years. How could Veltol possibly lose this battle? In the decisive battle 500 years ago, he had witnessed a terrifying power that made him feel despair just by looking at it. Perhaps Veltol's Marquise had never witnessed it either. Just when he thought his mission was over, a rain of bullets fell from somewhere. Did a few fourth-generation Merinos think they could challenge Graham? They probably came to clean up the remnants, giving him more work to do protecting the beautiful woman. On the other side, Veltol had yet to appear, and Machina was about to be thrown into the refining furnace. Without saying much more, Veltol had arrived late. During her free fall, the person she loved appeared in her mind. From now on, she would no longer be able to care for the great demon king with her own hands. After regretfully confessing her feelings, she thought it was over for her, when suddenly a familiar scene from before repeated itself. Veltol had arrived just in time to rescue Machina. Marcus had anticipated this. He mocked Veltol, saying he was living like a king, playing games every day while being celebrated by everyone. Veltol still gave him a chance to surrender and return to serving the demon king, but there was no way that would happen. Veltol drew his strongest sword and rushed into battle. Marcus used the same familiar techniques. He had no new moves, but with his unique familia, he still posed a challenge for Veltol, who hadn't fully regained his power. Both exchanged techniques filled with the affection of master and servant. Marcus remained confident because he hadn't used his full strength, even when Veltol had enhanced his power with magic but was still at a disadvantage. Marcus was gleeful about Veltol's current state. Just as Veltol stood up, he attacked again continuously. He said he would kill the Demon King and other immortals, leaving only himself as the new Demon King. Too busy rambling, he left an opening that Veltol exploited, thrusting through his head. But it seemed Marcus had anticipated Veltol would try to destroy his familia and dodged quickly. As long as the familia remained, growing any number of heads wouldn't be a problem. He seemed very confident and reliant on that thing at the back of his neck. Immediately after, he detonated the blood marks that had stuck to Veltol's body. At such close range, it was impossible to dodge. Veltol endured a series of terrible attacks. When both arms could no longer be used, Marcus still wasn't satisfied and delivered a finishing blow. That amount of damage couldn't eliminate Veltol, but rendered him unable to fight. Smugly, Marcus returned to Machina to continue his work. Why not throw the Demon King in too, since he was also immortal? Because he couldn't. More accurately, he didn't have a single chance to do so. Veltol complimented Marcus for reducing him to this state. Veltol was forced to reveal his trump card. Marcus should feel honored to be the second person to face his second form. Veltol still gave him one final chance. After 3 strikes, he would have no choice but to eliminate this threat. Though Marcus was scared enough to wet himself, he still wanted to maintain his image and refused to submit to Veltol. As he attempted to attack, he was immediately neutralized, very similar to the technique he had used before, except Veltol performed it without chanting. He only needed to think, and he could execute all kinds of magic. Veltol began to change form. Before we see this second form, we need to understand why Veltol suddenly regained his tremendous power. The answer was Takahashi. The two had previously discussed this strategy. They needed to increase Veltol's fame faster by any means necessary, at any cost, or they wouldn't be able to defeat Marcus. Takahashi hacked into advertising and news channels across the country, then redirected them all to Veltol's livestream videos. As a result, his worship increased dramatically, and his power returned. Now, let's see what Veltol's second form was, a terrifying black dragon. At this point, Marcus could only gamble. The opportunity to turn back was gone, but he couldn't even cast a spell, so how could he fight? Marcus couldn't accept it. For 500 years, he had researched and developed technology surpassing magic, the pinnacle of the world, but now Veltol had taken it all away in an instant. Veltol just needed to touch it to understand everything and perfectly replicate what took 500 years to develop, the peak of copying, even improving on the original creator's work. Now Marcus could only wail and cry, asking why it was like this. Finding it too annoying, Veltal made him taste various magic spells. Though Marcus could recover, it still hurt, and Veltal even gave him a surprise gift. The familia he was so proud of had been infected with a virus that created ghosts in his head, making Marcus panic. He quickly knelt down, begging for mercy, but it was too late. Veltal stabbed him and lifted him up like skewering garbage. In desperation, Marcus tried to struggle with a technique, but it was useless against Veltal. Now the game was over. See you in hell. Veltal returned to his original form. Machina was shocked, but this was what truly befitted Veltal. A demon king was the embodiment of fear and despair. At this moment, he realized what Graham had said. Because of Machina, he had become stronger, his power reaching a new level beyond what he had before. He quickly embraced her and said, "I love you." Somewhere else, a girl named Hizuki, who was being bullied by her classmates, began to feel the world was boring and wanted to escape it. Today, her class had a new transfer student. Surprisingly, it was Demon King Veltal. He had traveled a long way to enroll in Akihabara Magic Academy for short-term study. This story begins a few days earlier. Veltal was struggling with a new game. After much effort, he conquered it and defeated the final boss, moving Machina to tears. Veltal confidently showed off to his viewers that while ordinary people only needed 10 hours to beat this game, he needed 74 hours. Veltal thanked his viewers for following him for several days and wished them an eternal sleep. The 74-hour continuous livestream left Veltal's back in pain. Machina entered, praising his tremendous achievement, but reminded him to take breaks after 24 hours next time. Moreover, not seeing him for 3 consecutive days almost made Machina depressed. Veltal quickly boasted that his subscriber count had exceeded 3 million. Machina asked what he wanted to eat to celebrate this huge achievement. Veltal said it wasn't necessary. What mattered was that his gaming skills had reached a new level. Veltal told Machina that the second form of his demon sword wasn't very useful. It looked similar to Hero Graham's, which Veltal found a bit complicated. After the Marcus incident, Veltal thought he should search for the other Marquillas, including Thunder Marquis Najine, Black Dragon Marquis Silva, and Sky Knight Marquis Maya. Before, Machina had been able to track Maya and Najine's locations, but afterward, she lost contact completely. Marcus hadn't mentioned any other Marquillas besides Zeno, whom he had turned into fuel in the immortal furnace. Given his character, if the other Marquillas had also been captured for fuel, he would certainly have boasted about it. Therefore, Veltal guessed that Marcus hadn't used the other Marquillas for the immortal furnace. He wanted to find them and asked Machina to help him. What they needed now was the Marquis Codex. It was something into which the 6 demon Marquillas had infused their magic, automatically recording their journeys to show each person's location. Machina remembered it had been lost when their side was defeated. Fortunately, Marcus didn't have it. Just then, Takahashi came to visit, even though Machina had told her to come less often. Yet she consistently came 5 days a week. Veltal knew full well that Machina was happy to have Takahashi visit. Veltal asked if Takahashi was still in high school. Her young age doing such dangerous things worried Veltal, but Takahashi said youth had talent. When questioned by Machina, she fell onto Machina's lap and changed the subject to ask about Veltal's live streaming. She suggested he consider editing the long videos so people without much time could still watch them. Takahashi asked what game Veltal planned to play next. Veltal hadn't thought about that because he was planning something else. Takahashi then asked why they both seemed secretive, even pouting because she didn't want to be left out. Veltal revealed their purpose of finding the ancient magical Marquis Codex. Takahashi immediately became interested and confidently said a hacker like her could handle it. Seeing Takahashi planning to search for it online, Machina said it wouldn't be that easy. Takahashi replied that Machina was too inexperienced, who would simply search, "Where is the Marquis Codex?" They wouldn't search for its location but would research individuals or organizations collecting artifacts, setting conditions for artificial souls to filter a large amount of information. With just a few keystrokes, she found results. Veltal praised her and promised to reward her generously in the future. Displayed on the screen was Akihabara City, home to the world's leading magical education institution. Akihabara Magic Academy was built after the Immortal War. Legend told of a treasure deep underground that had been there for 500 years, coinciding with when the Marquis Codex was lost. Machina wondered how they would break in. Takahashi said they wouldn't resort to such crude violence and suggested hacking into the school's security system. Veltal said they didn't need to take such risks. They just needed to become students of the academy. Finding this idea quite good, Takahashi volunteered to submit official study abroad applications for all three. After finalizing the plan, Veltal declared that their main objective to identify and recover the Marquis Codex had officially begun. 4 days later, they quickly boarded a train to leave the city under falling snow. In no time, all three arrived in Akihabara City. Veltal didn't bother showing his documents, thinking his famous face was the most effective identification. But the attendant didn't care. Whether famous or ordinary, everyone had to present identification. Takahashi quickly came over with the prepared documents to help him pass through. Seeing the bustling Akihabara city excited Veltal because of its familiar silhouette. Many magical limbs and tools were on display, as Akihabara was famous for manufacturing highly efficient tools. Veltal felt the development of this place was unimaginable. He had never thought everything could be changed except the brain and spinal cord. Takahashi quickly took everyone to Akihabara Magic Academy, where they met with Principal Charlotte to register their documents. Takahashi knew she was one of the three great families of Akihabara, the head of the ancient Goal family, who controlled half of the city's magical district. Takahashi feared their fake documents would be discovered, but surprisingly, their files were easily approved. Charlotte only asked what their purpose for studying abroad was. Before Takahashi could make something up, Veltal frankly mentioned the treasure beneath the academy. The principal knew their interest in the treasure was certainly not coincidental. Veltal then spouted some philosophical lines to Charlotte, leaving Takahashi gaping. The principal was very impressed with Veltal's enthusiasm and allowed them to investigate. But she said discovering the treasure was impossible because it had been sealed. To break the seal, they needed keys held by the three great families, the Goal, Exbol, and Jana houses. The three magical artifacts they possessed were called Yagalia. The sword Charlotte wore at her side was one of the three. The other two were the Exbol family's crown and the Jana family's orb. If Veltal could borrow the other two, the principal would be delighted to help him break the seal on the treasure, as collecting the Yagalia had long been a desire of the Goal family. However, a major problem had occurred. The Jana family's orb had been lost. The principal then handed Veltal's group over to Miss Santa, who was both their homeroom teacher and the principal's assistant. Veltal found her name strange and wanted to call her Jose for simplicity. Jose was annoyed but helpless. Takahashi, without her familia, felt very insecure. At this prestigious academy, wearing it was forbidden because they wanted to educate students in the traditional way. They believed that learning magic from basic principles would nurture excellent mages. Understanding all things would lead to understanding the true nature of magic. While waiting for the teacher's introduction, Veltal was thinking about how to greet the class coolly, like in the school games he played. Machina had also watched a film with a similar setting, so she was confident in her experience. Veltal used his Demon King privilege to enter the room first, which was the beginning of his greeting to the whole class. Machina introduced herself as if she were at a matchmaking event, while Takahashi joked around to make a good impression. Miss Jose asked all three to take a magic power measurement test for level classification. Veltal warned in advance that he would definitely break the stone and wouldn't pay compensation. The teacher didn't believe him, but unexpectedly, Veltal released his magic power, causing it to overload and shatter. Machina laughed triumphantly because her husband was too powerful. The next class began, and Miss Jose taught the class about soul-copying magic. Though forbidden, she thought these spells still made great contributions to human development. Seeing Veltal sitting with folded arms and not taking notes, the teacher reminded him, but he told her not to worry because he already knew all this basic knowledge. The teacher then asked about the events of the year 722 to test him, but unexpectedly, Veltal recited it perfectly without missing a word, even providing additional background information that made Jose tell him to stop being so verbose. Machina, sitting next to him, smiled triumphantly because her husband was no ordinary person. During lunch, while everyone was discussing the new popular streamer Veltal, Hizuki was bothered by Albert, the heir of the Herga family. He mocked her for relying solely on being from one of the three great families to cling to this school. Albert claimed Hizuki was just the child of a useless man from the electronics district and a half-breed elf woman. Hearing this, Hizuki was about to lose her patience, but Albert wouldn't stop his mockery. Suddenly, Veltal spoke up because he was being disturbed while enjoying his delicious udon noodles. Albert recognized Veltal as the new exchange student from this morning and quickly introduced himself in an aristocratic manner. Veltal promptly taught him that disturbing others during meals was a serious offense. Albert mocked Veltal, saying he was just a streamer with no right to lecture him. Veltal thought Albert had watched his live streams and thanked him for helping increase his ad revenue. When Veltal heard Albert was from the Herga house, he mentioned the name of Albert's ancestor, expressing surprise that such a coward had lived so long. Not long ago, Albert's ancestor had fled the battlefield. Albert claimed Veltal was making things up, but Veltal pointed out that Albert was no better than Hazuki yet was lecturing others. Albert was dissatisfied, claiming Hazuki was just the failed daughter of the Jana family, and decided to throw down a gauntlet challenging Veltal to prove himself. So the two headed to the arena instead of meeting behind the school gates. Takahashi and Mishina saw Hazuki sitting alone and found it boring, so they came over to join her, taking the opportunity to ask why she was isolated by the other students. Hazuki only said they didn't like having a failure like her at this school. Her theoretical subject scores were quite good, but Hazuki couldn't use magic. Mishina wondered why this school allowed students to duel each other. Hazuki explained that learning must go hand in hand with practice, so the school even encouraged students to clash to increase their strength. Miss Jose, who was teaching, was dragged away to referee the duel. Before starting, Veltal called out to Hazuki, though mispronouncing her name, asking her to watch his brilliant victory. Albert told Veltal not to be so confident and boasted about his academic achievements, being the only one to get a plus in all subjects. Albert confidently claimed he was the school's top student, second only to the principal. Veltal didn't think so and rated Hazuki higher than Albert. Mishina immediately thought the school's evaluation system must be flawed because Veltal was never wrong. Hazuki asked Takahashi if Mishina had watched too many 180-minute palace dramas, since she kept calling Veltal "my lord." To make the battle more balanced, Veltal told Albert he would let him win if he could make Veltal move even one step. Albert found this offer too good to refuse and agreed immediately. Veltal then made him establish a covenant. If Veltal lost, he would do anything Albert wanted, but if he won, Albert couldn't come near Hazuki. Albert accepted and pledged his family's honor on the bet. Hazuki told Mishina's group to stop Veltal because Albert was very strong. But there was no way Mishina and Takahashi would do that. How could the mighty Demon King lose? Miss Jose told the duelists to take their positions and state their names as per procedure. Albert was about to make his move when Veltal reminded him not to disappoint and urged him to use his full power if he wanted to win. Seeing this, Albert went all out, causing Miss Jose to try to stop them for fear of serious injury. However, Veltal said it was fine and even seemed extremely excited. Albert quickly chanted a spell while Veltal felt nostalgic, as it had been a long time since he participated in a magic battle. Hazuki thought Veltal had a death wish, but was surprised when he easily caught the arrow shot by Albert with his bare hand. Veltal felt his opponent's magic wasn't bad. With another 200 years of training, he might get 2 more seconds of screen time. The reward he would give Albert was a ticket to experience the true nature of authentic magic. Veltal's magic beam quickly knocked Albert unconscious. Mishina felt Albert was honored to personally taste it despite being an ordinary person. Hazuki found it hard to believe that a high school student could control magic as well as Veltal. Even Miss Jose was stunned and almost forgot to announce the winner. A moment later, Veltal came over to say this victory was dedicated to Hazuki. Although very grateful to him, she warned them not to associate with her and left. While walking, Takahashi was a bit surprised that there were still ill-tempered nobles like Albert in this era. It seemed Akihabara was a city that still preserved the cultural traits of Anne's. She wondered why they needed all 3 Igalia items to open the seal containing the Marquis Codex. Why not just have Veltal break the box with one move? However, he worried that if it was sealed with ancient magic, forced opening would immediately destroy what was inside. Now they only had one way to collect the Igalia items, including the sword already with the principal, the crown held by the head of the Ixbol family representing the Akihabara district, and the orb whose whereabouts were unknown. Takahashi felt they were searching without enough information, which wasn't good. Veltal revealed that Hazuki was the head of the Jana family. The family's decline must be related to the lost orb. She was the key they were looking for. Takahashi thought the duel was actually a plan for Veltal to win Hazuki's favor. But in reality, Veltal just found Albert annoying, so he set it up. They were approaching an area called the Electronics District. Veltal was extremely eager to explore it because it resembled a maze. Takahashi mentioned rumors that once inside, it would take a whole day to get out. Now with her, a super electronic genius, she would take on the responsibility of gathering information. Takahashi promised to lead them to the place with the most information. Surprisingly, it turned out to be a maid cafe, where beautiful females from all races gathered, enough to satisfy the hearts of men. Veltal expressed doubt about collecting information here, but Takahashi confidently said maid cafes were gathering places for all kinds of people, and the maids loved to gossip, making it the most convenient place to extract information. Veltal was surprised, thinking Takahashi came here just to look at pretty girls. Machina felt the atmosphere was special, though she couldn't describe how. She worried the prices would be expensive, but Takahashi thought it was worth it because when beautiful people served you, money was just a number. Veltal didn't care much because he already had his own butler and maid. Moreover, the maids here were very different from what he knew. Takahashi reminded him not to touch inappropriately if he didn't want to be taken to the police station. Veltal suddenly remembered Hazuki's warning not to get close to her, which made him a bit concerned, while Machina sensed she was trying to avoid contact with others. Takahashi told them to approach slowly without rushing. Machina genuinely wanted to be friends with her. Takahashi wanted to put this aside and called a maid to serve them. Having come here, they should put work aside and have fun unexpectedly. The maid serving them was Hazuki. Earlier, Hazuki had felt a bit guilty for being harsh with Veltal's group. She had just regained her spirits and vowed not to speak to them again. But now she had to serve all three. Takahashi and Machina were extremely delighted by Hazuki's cute maid appearance, while Veltal acted superior because now he was Hazuki's master. Although very angry, she had to control herself for work and asked Veltal what he would order. Unexpectedly, what he chose was an amurus accompanied by the maid's cute dance. Hazuki was going to refuse, but when she heard Machina thinking she couldn't do it, Hazuki decided to show them what a real maid was like. All the food was quickly served. Hazuki showed her talent for writing with hot sauce, and then did a cute pose, amazing the three. After eating their fill and feeling satisfied, Veltal agreed to let Hazuki leave. Unexpectedly, when she saw the cafe was empty, she naturally sat down and drank Takahashi's water. Veltal asked if Hazuki was the head of the Jana family and revealed his purpose of searching for Yagalia to rule the world. Veltal wanted to open the underground treasure beneath Akihabara Academy, but Hazuki said that was impossible. He guessed she had lost the Yagalia, which was the reason for her family's decline. Now Hazuki was just a poor student who had to work part-time to make a living. Takahashi asked what Yagalia was because she was just following Veltal for fun and didn't know anything. Hazuki said it was something to prove a person was king. Midway through speaking, Hazuki suddenly felt a headache. She continued that 500 years ago, Hero Graham, who had defeated the Demon King, was given Yagalia by the goddess Medea, along with an enormous treasure and blessing. However, he was later exiled by the incompetent king of that time. When leaving the country, Graham handed Yagalia to someone that was the second king of Lexel, the ancestor of today's three great families. When the king passed away, he gave it to his three children. Unfortunately, the three children turned against each other, eventually forming a council system to govern the territory. Although the situation had somewhat improved, hatred still remained. Hazuki was about to leave, thinking Veltal's group no longer needed her, but he wanted her help to arrange a meeting with the head of a family. Because Hazuki owed them, she agreed. Takahashi took advantage of this opportunity to hug her and sniff her repeatedly, thereby discovering that Hazuki's stomach was growling from hunger. Veltal's group then took her to the market to eat. People around showed displeasure at the appearance of Magic Academy students. Hazuki quickly arranged the meeting Veltal wanted, but said she could only bring one person with her to meet Kunya, the head of the Exbull house. Veltal said he would go and was surprised by the taste of the food there, all thanks to genetic modification technology. The meat Hazuki was eating was dragon meat, making Veltal and Machina hesitant. The thought of eating the flesh of their subordinate species was uncomfortable, but when provoked, no one could resist. Veltal and Machina each took a skewer to try, and unexpectedly, the irresistible flavor made them unable to stop. After eating their fill, Takahashi began asking Hazuki for her familia address. At this moment, two police officers suddenly approached to question Veltal's group. Having magic students loitering around was not good. Fortunately, the principal came to help, so Veltal's group didn't have to go to the police station. Takahashi thanked her for helping them avoid trouble, and the principal asked what Veltal's group was doing here. He said Hazuki was showing them around Akihabara district and asked in return what the principal was doing here. She said she had an appointment with Jose but couldn't find her. The principal suddenly called Hazuki for a private conversation. Seeing this, Veltal pulled Takahashi and Machina to a fried chicken shop next door to give them space to talk. When only the two remained, the principal was happy that Hazuki had made friends and wanted to ask her opinion about becoming her adopted daughter. As long as Hazuki nodded, she would become the principal's daughter and the big sister of the school. However, Hazuki feared that if the principal sided with her, she would be shunned by other nobles. The principal said she didn't care about that, but Hazuki wanted to protect the Jana house herself for her parents' sake. The principal instructed Hazuki that no matter what happened, she shouldn't forget that the principal always considered her family. After their conversation, the principal left, and Hazuki heard some voice in her head. Takahashi came over to check on her because she looked terrible, but Hazuki said she was fine. Veltal then went to meet Mela, Kunya's assistant. Before leading Veltal and Hazuki inside, he needed to check their bodies. After confirming they weren't carrying weapons, Mela led them to meet Kunya. The head of the X-Bull house turned out to be a goblin who always welcomed beautiful people like Hazuki. Veltal introduced himself and expressed surprise that the head of one of the three great families was a goblin. Kunya was annoyed by Veltal's formal attitude, but he was naturally straightforward. Kunya laughed because he hadn't cared about his lineage for a long time. He considered himself just a small merchant from the bottom of society. Kunya had been the caretaker for the X-Bull family head, suddenly gained trust, and was given the right of inheritance. Kunya asked what business Veltal had with him. He mentioned Igalia, and Kunya snapped his fingers to summon the crown Veltal was looking for. It had been attached to the owner's soul. Unless the soul was lost due to external factors, Kunya wouldn't hand it over. Veltal immediately understood this meant he would have to kill Kunya to take the crown, making the atmosphere tense. He quickly said he was just joking and asked to borrow the crown for a while. Veltal only wanted to confirm if what he was seeking was inside the treasure, as his purpose was to conquer the world. Kunya guessed he must be crazy, but, because he was introduced by Hazuki, wouldn't inquire further. After lighting a cigarette, Kunya revealed that Akihabara was bound by outdated traditions. He wanted to break them, but the leaders of the magic district stubbornly didn't understand the need for change for the city's future. Kunya thought it would be useless even if Veltal borrowed the crown because to break the seal, all Yagalia items needed to be in one master's hands. In other words, he needed to become the true king of this city. Only when all Yagalia items united would their true power be released. Kunya guessed Principal Charlotte probably thought the same. She wanted to use Yagalia to protect the city's traditions, completely opposite to Kunya's aspirations. Both had their own valid reasons. Kunya wanted to speak privately with Veltal for a moment, so Hazuki temporarily went outside. He revealed he wanted to join Veltal regardless of his purpose. Kunya wanted them to cooperate and exchange information. One thing he didn't want Hazuki to know was that her family's orb was near him. Yagalia owners could sense the presence of other Yagalia items as long as they were in Akihabara. Surely Principal Charlotte felt the same. The request Kunya made to Veltal was to help Hazuki, to free her from the city's constraints, because Kunya owed her father a great deal. According to records, Hazuki had been given the orb by the previous family head when she was very young. The key to its location was her. Meanwhile, Machina was extremely frustrated because she had to spend her own money to buy her own books. Takahashi quickly came over, curious about what she had just bought. Machina stopped her, fearing her private secret would be exposed. When they sat down, she asked why Takahashi came with them here. Takahashi felt like Machina was acting like a worried older sister. After all, there probably weren't many people older than Machina in this era. She quickly told stories about the other demon marquises, especially mentioning Maya. Machina treated her exactly like her cute little sister, making Takahashi jealous. Just then, she noticed the principal and signaled to call her, but the principal ignored them. Later, Veltal returned and said Kunya was on their side, all thanks to Hazuki. At this point, Machina wanted to visit a few more bookstores, while Veltal wanted to visit an arcade. Takahashi felt it was too late and suggested staying at Hazuki's place. Everyone agreed despite Hazuki's objection, but because 3 people agreed, she had to go along with the majority, and suddenly, Hazuki didn't understand why she ended up having to bathe with Veltal. Previously, Hazuki's inability to use magic despite being admitted to the school had caused other students to gossip. They believed she had used backdoor connections through her relationship with the principal. Hazuki actively kept her distance from those who approached her because she feared they would be ostracized if associated with her. However, even when she opened up, Hazuki accidentally injured her only friend, which made people hate her more. Rumors suggested the Jana family had a hereditary constitution for summoning spirits. Hazuki's past was filled with misfortunes, from being orphaned to becoming a targeted victim. She had experienced it all. Currently, Veltal's group had arrived at Hazuki's house for an all-night party. Takahashi was quite surprised that she worked part-time, but Hazuki revealed she had to do it secretly because the school prohibited it. Machina showed off her cooking skills, proud of her decades of experience living alone. Hearing this, Takahashi quickly changed the subject, fearing exposure, and suggested all four of them play fighting games together. As the world's top streamer, Veltal couldn't refuse this proposal, and Hazuki accepted the challenge after being provoked by Veltal, who implied she was afraid to play. The result was Veltal being utterly defeated without winning a single round. Takahashi teased him for being so bad, and together with Machina, challenged Hazuki. Later that evening, both had fallen asleep, and when Hazuki was about to take a bath, she was surprised to find Veltal already soaking in the tub as if at home, proudly showing off his marble-like body. Hazuki quickly apologized, saying she hadn't checked carefully, and was about to retreat when Veltal assumed she was frightened by the sight of his perfect body. He then confidently posed and even complimented Hazuki's figure, though adding it couldn't compare to his. Provoked, Hazuki charged forward and soaked herself, showing she wasn't afraid. She asked what Veltal had discussed with Kunya and wondered why he cared about her. Both at the canteen and in the electronics district. Was it because she was the head of the Jana family? Veltal told her to stop overthinking. He simply acted according to his wishes, and the bloodline matter was just a coincidental overlap with his mission. Now they were in the same boat. Veltal expressed his admiration for Hazuki because she not only appreciated her working parents but also protected her family. Her cooking was passable, and her gaming skills were decent but no match for his wife Machina. It had been a long time since Veltal felt this excited, and he asked how Hazuki felt. She actively moved closer to Veltal, saying she was very happy. Veltal took the opportunity to ask about an old photo of Hazuki that was facing down in her room. Hazuki decided to share her secret with him. In the past, Hazuki was still an energetic little girl when a servant informed her it was her birthday. Seeing Hazuki so happy made the servant feel that rumors about her being a cursed child from the electronics and magic districts were just nonsense. That day, her parents took her shopping, but their family attracted attention from people around them, who hurled insults. Her parents did their best to shield Hazuki from those words. They took her shopping, to the movies, and out to play on her birthday. Then tragedy struck. Hazuki's parents were attacked and died at the hospital entrance. According to records, Hazuki became the heir of Yagalia, which worried Kunya. If there had been any clues about the murderers of Hazuki's parents, he would have made them pay long ago. Currently, Kunya and the principal's duty was to protect Hazuki from danger. The memory of that tragic day still haunted Hazuki and made her blame herself greatly. She continued living there because her parents wanted her to live as a noble in this city. Hazuki felt that anyone associated with her in this city would be hurt and disappear. Therefore, from the beginning, she always wanted to keep her distance, believing she couldn't have happiness. Veltal thanked Hazuki for sharing her past with him. In the name of the Demon King, he swore he wouldn't blame Hazuki, even if he was implicated because of her. After bathing, Veltal told Hazuki to consider it a lifetime memory to have shared a bath with him. At that moment, he held Hazuki firmly, facing him, because behind her was someone who called himself Faceless, claiming to be a hero of the gang. He demanded that Veltal leave regarding the matter of Marcus, and Faceless promised not to pursue if Veltal's side complied. Hearing him say he would also handle the treasure beneath the academy angered Veltal, because a nameless person like him was not worthy of calling himself a hero. The only person in this world who could call himself a hero in front of Veltal was just one person. Seeing the negotiation fail, Faceless attempted to flee, warning before disappearing that Akihabara City would soon change. Hazuki unconsciously grabbed Veltal's sleeve in fear. At this time, Principal Charlotte had come to meet Kunya, who ordered his subordinates to leave so they could speak privately. Charlotte attacked when Kunya wasn't paying attention because her purpose was the crown. Elsewhere, people reported that the body in the recent accident was that of Scholar Jose, and the news suddenly announced Kunya had been murdered. The police had issued a warrant for Principal Charlotte as an important witness for investigation. Hazuki was shocked seeing the news. Through this incident, tension between the Magic District and the Electronics District would escalate. A Level 2 alert status had been declared throughout the city. All students were required to gather at the practice hall, and at that moment, a white-haired girl appeared. Hazuki later secretly met with Charlotte, believing everything was her fault. However, after a brief interaction, she realized the principal before her was an imposter because the real Charlotte would call her by name. Meanwhile, the girl in the practice hall began attacking and controlling the students. All remaining students had become her hostages. The fake Charlotte was very disappointed at being discovered. Hazuki recognized the person before her as Scholar Jose. She revealed that her mission from the gang was to collect all 3 Eugalia items, with Cunya's being the most difficult to obtain. When she realized he had lowered his guard with the 3 great families, she decided to impersonate the principal. Scholar Jose had entered the mechanical room, removed her parts, and implanted them into Charlotte's body. The real Charlotte had apparently been blown to ashes. She demanded Hazuki cooperate obediently, but Hazuki refused. However, if she didn't comply with Jose, other students would be in danger. Hazuki thought Jose intended to kill her to take the orb. But what Jose wanted was to summon the goddess Medea. The 3 Eugalia items were necessary sacrifices. The truth was that the orb was right here. Medea was originally a high-level sacred entity that couldn't be maintained and had to dissipate. But by lowering her soul level, she had transferred her vessel to a newborn baby to avoid this. The reason Jose knew about this was because 10 years ago, she had attacked Hazuki, and Medea had appeared briefly before going berserk. In other words, Medea was using Hazuki's body as a vessel. At this point, Veltal secretly signaled Albert to lend him some of his power to destroy the light swords above, helping the students escape from being controlled. He signaled Takahashi to turn off the lights in the practice hall, then rushed to break the light swords one by one. The reason Hazuki couldn't use magic was because her magic had to be used to suppress Medea. The orb was used for that purpose, and Jose knew where it was based on records of Hazuki's surgery 10 years ago. Her right eye wasn't a prosthetic, but the orb that Hazuki's mother had requested the doctor to implant. After driving away the opponent, Takahashi showed Veltal where Hazuki was, while Machina chased after the white-haired woman. Albert was assigned to protect the students. Meanwhile, Jose confessed that she was the one who had killed Hazuki's parents, and her injured friend was also attacked by an assassin Jose had sent. Angry, Hazuki tried to remove her artificial eye just as Veltal appeared in time. Jose felt he was the factor disrupting her 10-year plan. However, the war in this city was inevitable. When Veltal approached Hazuki, the ritual was complete, and the goddess Medea descended in Hazuki's body. On the other side, Hero Graham observed from above as the 2 districts of the city conflicted due to the deaths of Principal Charlotte and Cunya. The sky suddenly brightened with the appearance of goddess Medea. She was one of the 6 great gods, the deity governing fate. Medea found Veltal too disrespectful and was quite surprised he had lived until now. He felt she had weakened considerably, descending into a mortal's body without any self-respect as a deity. Medea revealed she hated Veltal, partly because he had black hair while her preference was for men with blonde hair. Veltal also disliked Medea because of her pompous way of speaking to him. Medea immediately grabbed her sword and charged, sending Veltal flying for daring to speak back to a deity. After being hit, Veltal regenerated. That was his rebirth ability thanks to the faith of his 3 million subscribers. Medea mocked his current form as unworthy of being Hero Graham's former adversary. She said she was still like a chrysalis, not yet metamorphosed, and then made a sword stroke that destroyed the entire road. She even easily cut off one of Veltal's arms. His immortality was immediately suppressed because the weapon Medea used was of mythological grade. Veltal recognized that she manipulated fate, granting luck to her own attacks and defenses while bringing misfortune to her opponent's techniques. For a gamer like Veltal, this ability was no different from hacking. In her golden age, Medea had used this method to erase aging for Graham, changing his life forever. Remembering her sin, Medea lost her composure and repeatedly apologized. Hazuki took advantage of this moment to regain partial control, begging Veltal to save her. He told her to take it slow. Meanwhile, Machina had found the white-haired girl, who discovered Machina's immortality and assessed her threat level at over 20. Machina quickly asked if they had met before. The other girl identified herself by code number Andre and asked for Machina's name. After realizing she didn't know Machina, she attacked. Machina dodged and used flying kick attacks, but Andre used a pair of black wings to protect her body. She then fired bullets at Machina, forcing her to use a shield to defend. Andre immediately seized the opportunity to charge forward, stabbing Machina in the chest and severely wounding her. However, Machina used her blood that had splashed onto the opponent's face, then detonated it, blowing off Andre's head. Surprisingly, Machina realized Andre had immortality. Upon seeing Andre's face, Machina confirmed her suspicion was correct. Andre was Maya. However, at this point, Maya didn't recognize Machina and gradually lost control of her magic. Just as she was about to attack Machina, Jose put Maya to sleep because she hadn't changed her voice. So she had discovered Jose disguised as Principal Charlotte. Machina demanded the opponent return Maya, but Jose said if she lost Maya, the organization would have her beheaded. Then Jose used spatial displacement to leave. Meanwhile, Veltal could only run from Media's attacks. He continuously provoked her and counterattacked. After being pressured by his opponent for a while, Veltal understood the true meaning of fate manipulation ability. Its true nature caused attacks with fire or sword with low magic ratios to be nullified even if they hit, while magic attacks with high magic ratios would miss. But Veltal discovered that nullification was automatic while dodging had to be manually activated. In other words, if hit by high magic techniques, Media would still take damage. She told Veltal to stop his analysis because she would destroy him down to his soul, then go meet Hero Graham again. What Media wanted in this world was to know that person's true feelings and to apologize. Veltal was surprised that she didn't understand Hero Graham's feelings. He understood very well because they had crossed swords. Veltal guessed Media must have known Graham's fate when granting him immortality and felt extremely guilty. Veltal asserted that her feelings for Hero Graham were just unrequited love, and he could guess how Graham would judge Media. She thought she would be hated, but Veltal said that wasn't the case. He would reveal Graham's true feelings to Media if she returned the body to Izuki. A goddess stealing a mortal's body was the action Graham hated most. Media was affected by these words, her mind sinking into guilt. Veltal seized this moment to call Izuki, allowing her to quickly regain control of her body. But Media rapidly took over again and charged at Veltal. He summoned his sword and took a stance identical to Hero Graham's. However, at that moment, Media changed her state. Jose, seeing this, immediately retreated, guessing the place was about to be destroyed. Media had switched to a new power, immersed in red. Veltal was excited because fighting a boss should have two phases. However, her pursuing attack blew him away. Fortunately, Hero Graham caught him, though it didn't look very comfortable. Graham asked what he was seeing. Veltal said it was a woman's madness when she fell in love and was consumed by passion. Hero Graham was about to act, but Veltal wanted to handle it himself because he had promised to save Izuki. Knowing he couldn't approach alone, he ordered Graham to support him. Media created a rain of deadly beams, while Graham and Veltal were ready to face it. Graham was responsible for supporting from behind, destroying the attacks to prevent Veltal from being hit, thereby helping him approach Media. She launched a devastating attack, but Graham cut it in too. People watching from below were protected by his teammates. Above, Veltal asked Graham to use his strength to throw him forward. While Media was only paying attention to Graham, he had used his sword to pierce through her. Media calmed down, but before her eyes was the image of Graham coldly turning his back and leaving. Media collapsed, her mouth continuously apologizing. Veltal told her she didn't need to apologize anymore. The sword he used could cut through souls, and now Media was about to disappear. Veltal advised her to trust her hero more. Media had chosen Graham, had loved him, so there was no way Graham would hate her because only he was the one Veltal acknowledged as a hero. From the beginning, Graham had never been unfortunate, and now Media could rest in peace. She thanked Veltal and also sent a final apology to Izuki. Veltal welcomed Izuki back, and she couldn't hide her emotions, breaking into tears from the intensity of the experience. Meanwhile, Takahashi contacted them to report that everything was fine with Veltal, but the city was about to erupt in war, and she didn't know how to handle it. He told Izuki they still had work to do. By now, residents of both districts had begun fighting and blaming each other for the deaths of their leaders. Veltal brought Izuki forward and declared her the new king of Akihabara. People continuously cursed Izuki as a half-breed, but she confidently introduced herself as the head of the Jana family and summoned the 3 Yigalia treasures. However, doubts still centered on Izuki. Veltal immediately encouraged her to be strong. Izuki regained her courage and revealed that someone had impersonated Principal Charlotte and murdered Kunya. She herself had also been attacked but was fortunately helped by friends. Currently, she held all the Yigalia items, so all power in Akihabara belonged to her. Kunya's subordinates prevented citizens from interrupting and wanted Hizuki to continue. As king, Hizuki declared a complete abolition of the Igalia monarchy. From this moment, the city's management would be handled by the city council. Some citizens wondered what to do without the three great families. Hizuki shouted at them to take care of themselves instead of depending on others. Afterward, Takahashi found the treasure beneath the academy and became rich. While Hizuki was surprised to learn about Veltal's identity as a demon king and Machina's position as a Marquise. Thanks to finding the ancient book, they learned that Black Dragon Marquis Silva and Sky Knight Marquis Maya were still alive. Hizuki later transferred to study with Takahashi, and Veltal felt the new uniform suited her well. The reason they called Hizuki here was to congratulate her on changing schools and to give Veltal a chance for revenge. However, he subsequently lost miserably again. Hizuki shared that thanks to her speech, she was quite popular at her new school. Veltal also gained more subscribers, though it caused some controversy. Hizuki's eye changed color, and media's voice thanked Veltal. Takahashi quickly came to invite Hizuki to play the final match with Machina, while she and Veltal would compete for the lowest rank. And so, the career of the modern-day Demon King as a streamer turned a new page,